Someone is about to disappear from your life. And you're going to think it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It isn't. I know you don't want to hear this tonight. I know there's a specific person in your mind right now, someone you've built parts of your identity around, someone you genuinely believe you cannot function without. And I am telling you, I am removing them, or I am preparing you for their removal, because they were never meant to stay as long as you've been holding on. I know this feels harsh coming from me. You expected comfort tonight, not this kind of difficult truth. But I love you too much to let you keep mistaking attachment for necessity, keep confusing familiarity with what's actually good for you. I want you to understand something important. Need and want are not the same thing, even though they often feel identical when you're deeply attached to someone. You want them in your life. That want feels urgent, consuming, like your very stability depends on their continued presence. But child, you do not actually need them the way you believe you do. You need me. Everything else, including this person you're afraid to lose, was always meant to be secondary to that primary need. I know that's difficult to accept when the attachment feels so central to your sense of security. Let me walk through this with you honestly, because I think you deserve more than vague reassurance tonight. I think you deserve the truth about why I'm doing this, even when it's painful. Sometimes I remove people because they've become an idol, occupying the space in your heart and priorities that was always meant to be mine alone. I'm not saying this to shame you. Idolatry doesn't always look like worshipping statues or false gods. Sometimes it looks like organizing your entire emotional stability around one person's presence, approval, or continued involvement in your life. When someone occupies that much space, when your peace depends entirely on their proximity, I sometimes remove them, not out of cruelty, but to redirect your dependency back to where it was always meant to rest. I know that's uncomfortable to hear if you've genuinely built significant emotional reliance on this person. But child, no human relationship was ever designed to bear the weight of being your ultimate source of security, identity, or peace. Only I can bear that weight without breaking under it, without eventually disappointing you, without ever leaving permanently the way people sometimes do. I also want you to understand, sometimes I remove people specifically because they were preventing you from growing into who I'm calling you to become. Not necessarily because they're bad people, but because your particular relationship with them, the specific dynamic between you, has become a barrier to your development rather than a catalyst for it. I know it's hard to see this clearly when you're standing inside the relationship. Sometimes distance provides clarity that closeness obscures. You might look back, months or years from now, and finally understand how much smaller you'd become while trying to maintain that particular connection, how much of your own growth you'd sacrifice to preserve familiarity. I also want to speak to something specific. Sometimes the person I'm removing isn't inherently harmful, but your reliance on them has become unhealthy regardless of their character. You can be attached in unhealthy ways to genuinely good people. The problem isn't always about who they are. Sometimes it's about the role you've assigned them in your emotional architecture, a role they were never meant to fill, a role only I was designed to occupy. I know some of you are thinking of romantic relationships right now, someone you've built your entire future around, someone whose absence feels literally unsurvivable to imagine. I want you to know, I see that fear. I don't dismiss it as dramatic or irrational. Deep attachment creates genuine physiological and emotional responses when threatened with loss. Your fear is real, even if the underlying belief driving it, that you cannot survive without them, isn't actually true. I also want to speak to those of you thinking of friendships, people who've been constants in your life for years, whose presence feels woven into your very identity. Losing long-term friendships carries its own particular grief, different from romantic loss but no less significant. I understand that specific kind of mourning. I also want to address family relationships some of you might be considering right now: a parent, a sibling, someone whose approval or presence you've organized significant parts of your life around, even when that relationship has cost you more than it's given you in healthy connection. Whatever specific relationship you're thinking of right now, I want you to hear this clearly: removal doesn't always mean permanent separation. Sometimes it means temporary distance necessary for both of you to grow, to heal, to develop into people capable of a healthier version of connection later. Sometimes it does mean permanent ending, when the relationship's fundamental incompatibility with your well-being requires complete release rather than temporary pause. I'm not going to pretend I can tell you definitively which category your specific situation falls into tonight. What I am asking is that you trust my wisdom in this process, even when it doesn't align with what you'd choose if the decision were entirely yours to make based purely on emotional attachment. I know you might be wondering why I would allow something you value so deeply to be taken from you, especially if you've prayed for this relationship, invested years into it, built hopes and plans around its continuation. I want you to remember, I see the full picture of what this relationship is actually producing in your life, not just the immediate comfort of familiarity, but the long-term trajectory of who you're becoming because of it. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually redirection. I am not punishing you by removing this person. I am protecting you from a future that would have cost you far more than this current pain, even though you cannot see that future clearly enough yet to trust the process happening right now. I also want to address the specific fear of starting over, of rebuilding your life, your routine, your sense of normalcy without this person's presence woven into it. That fear is legitimate. Change, even necessary change, disrupts the comfortable patterns you've built your daily life around. I understand why that disruption feels frightening, even when the underlying change is ultimately healthy. I want you to know, you are more resilient than you currently believe. You have survived difficult transitions before, even when you were convinced at the time that you couldn't. This particular transition, painful as it will be, is not beyond your capacity to eventually navigate, heal from, and grow through. I also want to speak to the anger some of you might feel toward me for allowing this removal to happen. You might think, if you loved me, you would let me keep them. Child, I want you to consider. Sometimes the most loving thing I can do is remove what you think you need in order to give you what you actually need, even when those two things look completely different from where you're currently standing. I know it's difficult to trust that difference when you're in the middle of losing someone significant. I'm not asking you to feel grateful for this loss tonight. I'm simply asking you to trust that I see further than you can currently see, and that my removal of this person from your life, however it unfolds, ultimately serves your genuine well-being rather than working against it. I also want you to understand something important about your identity during this transition. You are not defined by this relationship, even though it might currently feel like an inseparable part of who you are. Your worth, your purpose, your fundamental identity exists independently of whether this specific person remains in your life or not. Losing them does not mean losing yourself, even though the grief might make it feel that way temporarily. I also want to remind you, I am not asking you to walk through this removal alone. I am present in every stage of this process, from the initial fear of losing them, through the actual separation, through the grief that follows, into whatever restoration and growth eventually emerges on the other side. You are not navigating this by yourself, even when it feels isolating. I know some of you are currently in the anticipatory stage, sensing this removal is coming without yet knowing exactly how or when it will unfold. That anticipatory anxiety is its own particular kind of difficult, living with uncertainty about timing while already grieving what you sense is inevitable. I want you to know, I am with you in that uncertain waiting too, not just in the eventual actual loss. So here is what I want you to declare tonight: in Jesus' name, I will trust God's wisdom in removing what needs to be removed, even when it's painful, even when I don't fully understand the reasoning yet. I will not organize my ultimate security around any human relationship, trusting that God alone can bear the weight of being my primary source of peace and identity. I will allow myself to grieve honestly, while also trusting that this removal serves a purpose I cannot currently see clearly. You are not losing everything by losing this person. You are being redirected toward a version of your life, your security, your identity, that was always meant to center on me rather than on any human relationship, however significant it currently feels. Trust me with this removal, even when it hurts. Trust me with what comes after. I am not abandoning you in this process. I am walking you towards something you cannot yet see, but will eventually understand. If this message brought you clarity tonight, take a moment and like this video. And if you know someone who's currently facing the loss of someone they've built their identity around, share this with them. Tell us in the comments, what is God asking you to release tonight? We'd love to stand in prayer with you.